Okay. It's okay, great. So Shabbat Shalom, everybody. You'll never guess that we're having a slight problem with the sound system. But so hopefully we'll try to be loud.
And you should come
But
closer.
if you're coming a little bit closer, that can help in terms of folks within the sanctuary. For those joining us on Zoom, I think sound quality sounds okay?
Sounds perfect.
Okay, wonderful. So let's be thankful for what we have. Shabbat Shalom and welcome. Shuva Yisrael, return, O Israel. This is the Sabbath. We read the extra print in the prayer book. We first turn to page 647 for Or Zarua.
I think so.
647, 646.
Doesn't think like it would take 2 pages. Is that right? 47.
647. So, yeah, you'll see it right in the middle of the page.
Or Zarua la tzadik, u'yisrael simcha. Or Zarua la tzadik, u'yisrael simcha. Or Zarua la tzadik, u'yisrael simcha. Or Zarua la tzadik, u'yisrael simcha.
Again, Shabbat Shalom and welcome, and Shabbat Shalom to those joining us on Zoom. Our service now continues on page 120 with Hadlakat HaNerot, kindling the lights of Shabbat. And Michelle and Rebecca, you two are closest to our candles. So proximity can always be a nice thing. So services, page 120, as Michelle and Rebecca help us to welcome officially Shabbat. Thank you. We join together with Linda.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu lehadlik ner shel Shabbat.
Thank you. We now turn to pages 138 and 139 for Lachadodi. We'll be singing the first, the second, and the ninth verses.
Lechadodi lekrat kala, Kanei Shabbat mikabela. 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 Shamor v'zachor v'dibur echad, Ishmianu el hamiuchad, Adonai echad u'shemo echad, L'shem el tiferet v'letzilah. Lechadodi lekrat kala, Kanei Shabbat mikabela. Lechadodi lekrat kala, Kanei Shabbat mikabela. Likrat Shabbat lehuven elchad, Ki mekor habracha, Merosh mikedem nesucha, Sof ma'aseh b'machshava she'ila. Lechadodi lekrat kala, Kanei Shabbat mikabela. Lechadodi lekrat kala, Kanei Shabbat mikabela. Boi b'shalom ateret hala, Gam b'samcha u'tzola, Toch emunei am sigula, Boi chala, Boi chala. Lechadodi lekrat kala, Kanei Shabbat mikabela. Lechadodi lekrat kala, Kanei Shabbat mikabela.
The Chatzi Kaddish will be found on page 144. We join together with Linda.
Yitkada v'yitkada shmei Rabbah, Be'alma divrach yiruteh v'yamlik mahuteh, B'chayechon uv'yomechon, uv'chayei kol beit Yisrael, Bagala, Bagala, Uvizman Karif, Bimeru, Amen. Yehi Shemei Rabbah Mivorach, Le'olam u'le'mei Maya, Yitbarach, Yitbarach, V'yishtabach, V'yitpa'ar, V'yitromam, V'yitnaseh, V'yithadar, V'yithalei, V'yithalal, Shemei Dekudisha Brehu, Leila min kol birchata, B'shirata, Tushbechata v'nechemata, Damiran Be'alma, V'himeru, Amen.
Page 146. For those who are able, we rise for the Baruch Hu.
Baruch Hu et Adonai, Amen.
We turn to page 148. We read together in English, "Blessed are you, Adonai our God, ruler of the universe, who speaks the evening into being, skillfully opens the gates, thoughtfully alters the time and changes the seasons, and arranges the stars in their heavenly courses according to plan. You are creator of day and night, rolling light away from darkness and darkness from light, transforming day into night and distinguishing one from the other. Adonai Tsebaot is your name. Ever-living God, may you reign continually over us into eternity. Blessed are you, Adonai, who brings on evening.
Baruch atah Adonai, Hama'ari Faravim.
And we read on page 150. We read together in English. Everlasting love, you offered your people Israel by teaching us Torah and mitzvot, laws and precepts. Therefore, Adonai our God, when we lie down and when we rise up, we will meditate on your laws and your commandments. We will rejoice in your Torah forever. Day and night we will reflect on them, for they are our life, and doing them lengthens our days. Never remove your love from us. Praise to you, Adonai, who loves your people Israel.
Baruch atah Adonai, Ohev Amo Yisrael.
Page 152.
Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Baruch Shem Kevod Malchuto Leolam Vaed.
Please be seated. Page 154 for the Ve'ahavta.
Ve'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha bechol vavacha uvchol nashecha uvechol meotecha vehayu advarim ha'eleh asher anochi mitzavecha hayom alevavecha v'shinantam levanecha v'dibartam bam v'shivtecha b'veitecha uvlechtecha v'derech u'shokbecha uv'kumecha u'kshartam lehot al yodecha v'hayu letotafot b'neinecha uchtavtam al mitzvot beitecha uvisharecha l'man tizkeru v'hasitem et kol mitzvotai v'hitem kedoshim lelohechem ani Adonai Elohechem asher hotzeiti etchem me'eretz Mitzrayim lihyot lachem Elohim ani Adonai Elohechem.
Emet, page 157. Standing on the parted shores of history, we still believe what we were taught before ever we stood at Sinai's foot, that wherever we go, it is eternally Egypt, that there is a better place, a promised land, that the winding way to that promise passes through the wilderness, that there is no way to get from here to there except by joining hands, marching together. Michamocha, page 158.
Michamocha Rokeam lifnei Moshe Zeli Anu ve'omeru Adonai lo leolam abed.
And blessed are you, Adonai, guardian of Israel, whose shelter of peace is spread over us, over all your people Israel, and over Jerusalem. We turn to page 162. The Shamru is found at the top of the page.
Veshamru b'nei Yisrael et haShabbat la'asot et haShabbat lidorat hamerit olam. Beni uben b'nei Yisrael oti olam oti leolam. Shamru b'nei Yisrael et haShabbat la'asot et haShabbat lidorat hamerit olam. Ki sheshet yamim asa Adonai et hashamayim et haaretz. Meshamru b'nei Yisrael et haShabbat la'asot et haShabbat lidorat hamerit olam. Uvayom hashvi Shabbat vayinafash Shabbat vayinafash Shabbat vayinafash Veshamru b'nei Yisrael et haShabbat la'asot et haShabbat lidorat hamerit olam.
Page 164 for the tefillah. We invite those who are able to rise. Our prayers continue on the right-hand pages. A reminder, tonight is Shabbat Shuvah.
Adonai, open up my lips, that my mouth may declare your praise. Baruch Adonai, Eloheinu, Elohim Tzevi'noteinu, Elohim Abraham, Elohim Yitzchak, Elohim Yaakov, Elohim Sarah, Elohim Rivka, Elohim Rachel, Elohim Leon, Ha'el Hayadol Hamibur Hana'ah, Elohim, Yomed Chasadim Tovim, Yekanem Yichakol, Yitzocher Hasperot V'Yimado, Maybe you love me, so pray you Yes,
You are holy, your name is holy, and those who are holy praise you every day. Praised are you, Adonai, holy sovereign. Please be seated. Another stressful week for our nation and world. This one with distinct memories of the past as we ready tomorrow for the 20th anniversary of September 11th. We pray for peace and dedicate ourselves to work for justice and peace for ourselves, our nation and people, and for this broken world. Our prayer, Shalom Rav, page 178.
Shalom Rav Yisrael Amcha Tasim Leolam. Shalom Rav Yisrael Amcha Tasim Leolam. Ki otahu melech hadod lekol hashalom. Shalom Rav Yisrael Amcha Tasim Leolam. Shalom Rav Yisrael Amcha Tasim Leolam. B'tov v'necha levarei et Amecha Yisrael bechol עת ובכל שעה בשלומך. Shalom Rav Yisrael Amcha Tasim Leolam. Shalom Rav Yisrael Amcha Tasim Leolam. Tasim Leolam. Tasim Leolam.
Silent prayer, page 180.
Oh say shalom, shalom bimrama. Hu yaseh shalom aleinu. Ve'akol Yisrael ve'hibru amen. Hu yaseh shalom aleinu ve'akol Yisrael amen. Oh, say shalom, shalom bimrama. Hu yaseh shalom aleinu. Ve'akol Yisrael ve'himru amen. Ve'akol Yisrael amen.
For those who are able, we rise. The Torah will be taken from the ark. We sing Ki Mitzion, page 364 in our prayer.
Ki mitzion tetzeh Torah. Ki mitzion tetzeh Torah. U'libor Adonai miYerushalayim.
Please be seated. We are at the end of the Torah. As we read this evening, the succession of leadership, Moses calls his assistant Joshua and tells him in the sight of all Israel, be strong and resolute, for it is you who shall go forth with this people to the land that the Eternal swore to their ancestors to give to them, and as usual shall apportion it to them. And it is indeed the Eternal who will go before you. God will be with you. God will not fail you or forsake you. Fear not and do not be dismayed. It's a key transition. Moses prepares to die and Joshua prepares for a new role, the assumption of the mantle of leadership. The section which I will be reading begins on page 1550 of the Torah commentaries, starting at verse 22, and that will be through the Maft here. This evening, it's a new year. If you find yourself in the midst of the first days of this new year thinking, wow, I'd really like to have an aliyah to the Torah tonight. And feel like now is the time to volunteer. Rebecca, thank you. Now is the time to volunteer. So Rebecca will be our aliyah to the Torah.
Baruch et Adonai Hamborah.
Baruch Adonai Hamvarach le'olam va'ed.
Baruch Adonai Hamborah le'olam va'ed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bachar banu mikol hamim v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
It sounded very good last year.
Thank
It
you.
sounds very good
thank you.
again tonight. Amen. ויכתוב משה את השירה הזאת ביום ההוא וילמדה את בני ישראל ויצב את יהושע בן נון ויאמר חזק ואמץ כי אתה תביא את בני ישראל אל הארץ אשר נשבעתי להם ואנוכי אהיה עמך. ויהי ככלות משה לכתוב את דברי התורה הזאת על ספר עד תומם. ויצב משה את הלוויים נושאי ארון ברית אדוני לאמור לקח Sefer HaTorah hazeh v'samtem oto mitzad Aron Brit Adonai Elohechem v'he sam b'cha la'ed. Ki anochi yedati et miricha ve'et arakbecha hakashe hen ba'odeni hai imachem hayom mamrim heyotam im Adonai ve'ach ki acharei moti. Hakilu Elai et kol ziknei shivtechem v'shodrechem adabra v'oznechem et hadavarim ha'ela va'ida bam et hashamayim ve'et ha'aretz ki yedati acharei moti ki hashchet tishritun v'sartem min haderech asher tziviti etchem v'karati etchem ha'ra'a ba'acharit hayamim Ki ta'asu et hara be'enei Adonai v'hachiso b'maseh yedechem v'yedaber Moshe ba'oznei kol kahal Yisrael et divrei hashira hazot ad tumah.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan lanu Torah temet v'chayei olam natan b'tohinu Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen. Amen. Rebecca, thank you. Just beautiful. We rise as the Torah will be returned to page 374. Please be seated. We now pray on behalf. We offer this blessing of healing this Shabbat. As we do so, we are mindful of Robert Dower, Janet and Jim Dias, Alan Elias, Gerald Friedkin, Zena Gorber, Ed Jantz, Jeff Levy, Art Phillips, Michael Schwartz, Alan Stein, Michael Walsh. We pray for people over the world fighting COVID-19. For those in our sanctuary, please now say out loud the names for those whom we pray this Shabbat. And for those on Zoom, we invite you to unmute and say out loud the names of those for whom we pray this Shabbat.
Larry Abramson.
Cindy Epstein.
For all, may the Holy One send healing and shelter in protection. We sing Misha Baruch. Pardon me, we sing Heal Us Now.
If I knew Adonai v'nerafeh, Hoshienu v'nivashea,
Earlier this week, I recently read a beautiful story by Jeffrey Newman, which so fits the themes of this time of the year. Linda liked it earlier. Hopefully she'll like it again. Now, there was a man who was going from village to village. Everywhere he went, he asked the same question in each village: where can I find God? He journeyed from rabbi to rabbi and village to village, and nowhere was he satisfied with the answers he received. So quickly, he would pack his bags and then hurry on to the next village to repeat this process. Some of the rabbis replied, "Pray, my son, and you will find God." But the man had tried to pray, and he knew that he could not find God. And some replied, "Study, my child, and you will find God." But the more he read, the more confused he became, and the further he seemed from God. And some replied, "Forget your quest, my child. God is within you." But the man had tried to find God within himself and failed. One day, the man arrived wearily at a very small village set in the middle of a forest. He went up to a woman who was minding some chickens, and she asked, whom could he be looking for in such a small place? But she didn't seem surprised when he told her that he was looking for God. She showed him to the rabbi's house. When he went in, the rabbi was studying. He waited a moment, but he was impatient to be off to the next village if he could not be satisfied. Then he interrupted, "Rabbi, how do I find God?" The rabbi paused, and the man wondered which of the many answers he had already received he would be told this time. But the rabbi simply said, "You have come to the right place, my child. God is in this village. Why don't you stay for a few days? You might meet God." The man was puzzled. He did not understand what the rabbi could mean. But the answer was unusual, so he stayed. For 2 or 3 days, he stood round and round, asking all the villagers where God was that morning. But they would only smile and ask him to have a meal with them. Gradually, he got to know them and even helped with some of the village work. Every now and then, he would see the rabbi by chance, and the rabbi would ask him, "Have you met God yet, my son?" And the man would smile, and sometimes he understood, and sometimes he did not understand. For months, he stayed in the village, and then for years. He became part of the village and shared in all its life. He went with the people to synagogue on Friday nights and prayed with the rest of them. Sometimes he knew why he prayed, and sometimes he didn't. And sometimes he really said prayers, and sometimes he only mouthed the words. And then he would return with one of the worshipers for a Friday night meal. And when they talked about God, he was always assured that God was in the village, though he wasn't quite sure where or when God could be found. Gradually, too, he began to believe that God was in the village, though he wasn't quite sure where. He knew, however, that sometimes he had met God. One day, for the first time, the rabbi came to him and said, "You must have met God now, have you not?" And the man said, "Thank you, Rabbi. I think that I have, but I'm not sure why I met God, or how, or when. And why is God in this village only?" So the rabbi replied, "God is not a person, my child, nor a thing. You cannot meet God in that way. When you came to our village, you were so worried about your question that you could not recognize an answer when you heard it, nor could you recognize God when you met God, because you were not really looking for God. Now that you have stopped persecuting God, you have found God. And now you can return to your town if you wish." So the man went back to his town, and God went with him. And the man enjoyed studying and praying, and he knew that God was within himself and within other people. And other people knew it too. And sometimes they would ask him, "Where can we find God?" And the man would always answer, "You have come to the right spot. God is in this place." Tonight is Shabbat Shuvah, the Sabbath of return. That's a beautiful story. And tonight is tucked in between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. At this holiest time of the year, we get the gift of starting again. To quote a friend, knowing that all the missteps of the past year fade into the distance, and all the regrets we carry are now stepping stones to the future. It's a time of hope and potential. As we return to our best selves, may we be open to answers that place God, prayer, and Jewish learning in that goodness and amongst us. Ken Yehi Ratzon, be this God's will. Our service now continues on page 586. Please rise for the Elenu if you're able. The Elenu that we chant is the second paragraph down on the page. Please be seated. Page 589. Let the time not be distant, O God, when all shall turn to you in love, when corruption and evil shall give way to integrity and goodness, when superstition shall no longer enslave the mind, nor idolatry blind the eye. O may all created in your image become one in spirit and one in friendship, forever united in your service. Then shall your realm be established on earth, and the word of your prophet fulfilled. Adonai will reign forever and ever. V'ne'emar, page 591.
V'ne'emar v'haya Adonai l'melech al kol haaretz v'yom hahu Bayom hahu yeh Adonai echad. Ushemo, Ushemo, Ushemo echad.
Page 598 for the Kaddish. I ask that those in mourning or remembering the anniversary of the death of a loved one to please rise if you are able when their name is mentioned. During Shiva, we remember Leah Linton and Moshe Raz, cousin of Ruth Holt. During Shloshim, Debbie Deutsch-Webb, the niece of Leah Linton, and Rabbi Dick Hirsch. We remember the yahrzeits, the anniversaries of the deaths of Raymond Alpert, Jacob Baum, Milton Bisnoff, Ann Bress, Paul Morton Cohen, Max Gross, Ralph Howard, Walter Levin, M. Natalie Perry, Pauline Rosenberg, Alice Scheinbaum, Ben Scheinbaum, June Shohet, Rebecca Prebold Shore, Sadie Slutsky, and Freda Wilkin. We ask our worshipers in the sanctuary, should you have a dear one to add, to please rise and say their names now. And we ask our worshipers on Zoom, should you have a dear one to add, please unmute your computer and say their name now. On this date, we recall the anniversary of the 9/11 terror attacks that struck our nation 20 years ago, leaving thousands dead in an expanded circle of mourning. We remember the victims, innocent human souls, each of whom constituted an entire world, precious beyond measure. And we recall the extraordinary acts of bravery and efforts to avert the attacks as happened in the skies over Pennsylvania, and the extraordinary bravery of the New York Fire Department and others who gave their lives attempting to rescue all whom they could. We remember ordinary people working side by side with cops and firemen, frantically digging through the rubble in search of survivors. We remember the posters and funerals and the recitation of names. We also remember the dead this week from COVID-19. And each Shabbat, we mention 6 names amongst the 6 million murdered in the Holocaust and the Shoah. We remember this week Alexander Duchno, Herschel Duchno, Matvey Duchno, Samuel Keisler, Adolf Feldman, and Clara Borisovsky. In remembrance and solidarity, and on behalf of those for whom there is no one but us to say Kaddish, we now invite all to rise if you are able. Our Kaddish prayer, page 598. Yitgadal v'yitgadash shemei Rabbah, v'yalma divra chirute v'yamlich malchute, b'chayechon v'yomechon uv'chaye d'chol beit Yisrael, ba'agala uv'izman kari v'imru amen. Yehei shemei Rabbah muvarach le'olam l'almei almaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh. V'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal shemei d'kudusha b'rechu. La'ela min kol birchata v'shirata. Tushbachata v'nechamata. Damiram v'yalma v'imru. Amen. Yehei shlama rabba min shemaya. V'chayim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Oseh shalom b'mromav, hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Zichronam levracha, may their memories be for blessing, and let us say amen.
Amen.
Please be seated. Just a few announcements prior to our concluding hymn. Thank you, Linda, for the beautiful music. A reminder, Wednesday night is Kol Nidre. Thursday is Yom Kippur. Next week, our services are back at 7:30. And we conclude with Hashivenu, page 662. May God's presence be with you and give you peace. Shabbat shalom. For those in the sanctuary, I will be back in just a few minutes. For those on Zoom, hang on. I'm going to take the computer into my office so that we can say hi